The movie La Délicatesse is an adventure.
J'ai embrassé quelqu'un.
Quoi? Mais qui ça?
Je sais pas.
Yep, that's the one. And today we'll be using it to learn over 25 new grammar tenses and words from just a 2-minute trailer. I'm Kritika from Fluent U, and we want to help you learn French through real-world videos so you can speak just like a native. In this video, we'll be going over grammar tenses, lots of new vocabulary, French expressions, and false friends, or French words that look like English words but mean something different. For this video, I'll be using the interactive Fluent U platform, so if you want to follow along, there's a link to a free trial in the description. La Délicatesse follows the story of Nathalie, who is recently widowed and, amidst trying to keep up with her career, is trying to find some excitement back in her life. It's not long before she finds a little romantic flair between a coworker, and this love story is anything but conventional.
Elle est peut-être un peu obsessionnelle et hyperactive. Son mari est mort il y a 3 ans et depuis...
Son mari est mort. Yikes. Mourir is a verb that's part of the Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs, so it uses être as its auxiliary verb instead of avoir for passé composé. There's no word for ago in French, so instead we use il y a. Don't change it to il y avait or il y a eu. Even though it's past tense, it's still il y a. In French, we have 2 different words for the English word since. If you're using it as a conjunction, like since it's raining, we're going to stay at home, you would say puisqu'il pleut, on reste à la maison. Use puisque. If you're using it the same way as it's used in the movie trailer, like since then, it's depuis. By the way, these underlined words are ones that the system thinks you may not know. We can click on it and see the definition and listen to a sample sentence if you want to see it used in a different context.
Il y a 3 ans et depuis, mais c'est évident qu'elle se plonge dans le boulot.
Mais looks a little confusing here, but in this context, it indicates certainty. Tu viens? Mais bien sûr! Sometimes I really like French verbs because they're so literal. Se plonger means to immerse yourself, and in the movie it looks like she's really immersing herself in her job.
Y'a que ça pour elle. Merci Chloé pour les présentations.
French speakers commonly shorten the phrase il y a to ia, which is what we're seeing here. And que in this context means just or only. This might have been a little difficult to catch because the speaker kind of omitted the vowels in que, pushing que and ça together to say que ça instead of que ça.
Y'a que ça pour elle. Y'a que ça pour elle.
For example, tu ne manges que des patates? You're eating just potatoes? Or more colloquially, tu manges que des patates with the ne dropped.
Pour elle. Merci Chloé pour les présentations.
Ooh, we have our first faux ami. Présentation, don't be fooled, is not presentations in this context. It means introductions. Similarly, you would use the verb présenter to introduce your friend to someone, for example. I have a challenge for you. Throughout the video, I'll point out more faux amis, and your job is to keep track of how many we find and see if you still know the definitions by the end.
Tu crois pas que tu dois avancer? Tu crois pas que tu dois avancer?
We've got another new word here, avancer, and it's somewhat of a cognate, meaning to advance or to move on. Don't you think you should move on from your dead husband? Yikes.
Tu crois pas? Mais je te dis pas d'oublier François, hein, mais je te dis pas d'oublier François, hein, mais je te...
Je te dis pas. I'm not telling you. If you're still translating your French thoughts into English, you're probably going to come up with something weird like je ne dis pas à toi. That sounds weird. If you're telling someone something, or like in the previous example, introducing someone, you put the pronoun of the other party before the verb. Je te dis, je vous présente. Take note that these are situations where the pronoun is representing an indirect object. There is quite a bit of overlap between indirect object pronouns and direct object pronouns, so make sure you're aware of which one you're using. Going along with not translating your English thoughts, you'll likely learn verbs like oublier as to forget. While this is correct, it makes it a little difficult to understand why there's a de apostrophe here. De ou de apostrophe introduce a verb in their infinitive form, and there's no real English translation for this, so don't let me catch you translating your English thoughts again. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but French people really don't say the ne in spoken French. It's incorrect to write it this way, but when you're speaking, pretty much everyone drops the ne because it's much easier to say.
Je te dis pas d'oublier François. Tu vas pas rester enfermé toute ta vie. Tu vas pas rester enfermé toute ta vie.
Don't be confused here. This rester is not being introduced by a de because this is actually part of the tu vas pas. It's futur proche. Futur proche is a verb construction used to express things in the near future, and it's so easy. The first step is to choose your subject. In this case, it's tu. Then you conjugate it in the present tense with the verb aller, so tu vas or tu ne vas pas. Finally, you add whichever verb you're doing in the near future in the infinitive form. Tu vas pas rester. Enfermer is to be confined, and you can hear the word fermer in it, so that's your clue to what it means. Just like closed versus enclosed. Enfermer also has an extra E at the end because it's an adjective, and the speaker it's referring to is Nathalie, who is a woman. Toute is also agreed to la vie.
Tu sais à quel point je peux être important? Tu sais à quel point je peux être important? Tu sais à quel point...
Here we have one more new phrase that's a bit deceiving. If you translated it word by word, you may end up with something like at what point. However, this phrase à quel point actually means to what extent. Now, when we listen to that, it's really difficult to decipher the words. It all kind of sounds like mush. That's why it's really nice to have a tool to guide you, and Fluent U is my favorite. Basically, all the lessons are like this one with movie clips, trailers, TV shows, and they're each a language lesson. You can click on each word and get a definition with the video dictionary and hear the word in as many contexts as possible. You can get a free 2-week trial just by clicking the link in the description, so you've got nothing to lose. And let's see what happens next in this so far kind of depressing love story.
Je crois que j'aurais surtout besoin qu'on soit normal avec moi. Je crois que j'aurais surtout besoin qu'on soit...
Whoa, grammar alert. Let's go verb by verb. Je crois, easy, present tense, I believe or I think. J'aurais is in le conditionnel, or the would, could, should tense. But when you say it, it sounds the same as j'aurais in future simple. J'aurais besoin could mean I would need or I will need. However, croire implies a level of uncertainty, so in this case, le conditionnel is more suited to that. Surtout is quite a culprit here. Its main meaning is especially, but in this context, it takes the literal meaning, above all. And everyone's favorite, le subjonctif. In this case, avoir besoin que is the trigger expression for le subjonctif because it's an expression of necessity. She's expressing how she needs everyone else to be. Here she says qu'on soit, which is a little atypical. I would read this as for us to be, but in this context it's for people to be. Finishing it off with a cognate, normal avec moi, normal with me, expressing that she probably didn't like the pity the previous characters were giving her. So why is this sentence so confusing? Let me say it in English and then we can compare. I think that, above all, I would need people to be normal with me. English uses a lot of voice inflection, so as an English speaker, you're used to hearing this to decipher the meanings of words and sentences. If I was to talk like this, you would probably stop listening and it's very boring. Okay, I'm not saying that French people talk like robots, but the French language just uses less voice inflection, so you need to know the definitions of words in order to understand what's going on.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Je voulais vous voir pour le 114.
Voulait is in l'imparfait to express something that he wanted in the past, but not at a specific moment in time.
J'ai embrassé quelqu'un.
Quoi? Mais qui ça?
J'ai embrassé quelqu'un.
Quoi? Mais qui ça?
Je sais pas. Je sais pas. Bon, pour le 114, on verra plus tard. Plus tard. D'accord?
Verra is in future simple, and this is for a more long-term future. If she had said on va voir plus tard, I would interpret it as we'll see later today. But since she said on verra plus tard, that sounds more like we'll see tomorrow, in a few days, maybe next week.
Mais c'est qui ce mec?
Mec is an informal word for dude or guy, and if you want to learn more words like this, we have another video on French phrases to sound more like a native.
Un collègue.
Mais c'est qui ce mec?
Tu fais quoi?
J'ai rendez-vous avec Nathalie à 17h.
Tu fais quoi?
So you might be wondering why rendezvous does not have an article. From these sample sentences, we can see that the construction of subject plus avoir, there's no article, like j'ai rendez-vous, tu as rendez-vous, but otherwise you do say un rendez-vous.
Il est 16h59. J'ai pas envie d'être en avance.
Avoir envie de is a beautiful
Et envie
expression
de.
for expressing your desire or what you're feeling, and I think it just implies a little more nuance than je veux.
Avec Marcus?
Comment tu fais pour être avec un homme aussi laid? Comment tu fais pour être avec un homme aussi laid?
Take a look at the usage of the word aussi here. Instead of meaning also, this becomes an expression of intensity. So ugly. Yikes, that's so mean.
Comment tu fais pour être avec un homme aussi laid?
Tu le laisses tranquille, c'est compris? Tu le laisses tranquille.
I love both the expressions she uses here. The first one is laisser quelqu'un tranquille, and she's referring to the man she's seeing. The other guy said un homme aussi laid, and she's saying to leave that man alone. Since the man she's seeing is the direct object of the sentence, he's the one the leaving alone is happening to, she uses the direct object pronoun le, because l'homme is masculine. C'est compris, simple enough, is that understood? But she could have said tu as compris or vous avez compris. C'est compris has a snappier tone and is almost rhetorical in nature, whereas tu as compris is more when you actually care about whether someone understood something.
Oui, mais à quoi vous jouez sous vos airs de dépressif tombé de votre Suède? Oui, mais à quoi vous jouez sous vos airs de dépressif tombé de votre...
Okay, if you didn't understand the sentence, let me show you a trick to breaking it down. Let's divide it up into chunks. Keep the verbs with their objects and the nouns with the adjectives that are describing them. Mais à quoi vous jouez? Sous vos airs de dépressif, tombé de votre Suède. We can look up a couple words that we're unsure of. Don't be fooled, air means the appearance or the look of something, not air. Now isn't that so much easier to decipher? I encourage you to use this trick before looking at the translation.
Tu pourrais prétendre à beaucoup mieux. Tu pourrais prétendre à beaucoup mieux. Tu pourrais prétendre...
Now at first glance, you may look at this sentence and go, you could pretend much better. Pretend better about what? We have another faux ami here. Here's how you should actually go about deciphering prétendre. Tendre means to stretch, and the prefix près means before. And if you think about it, when you're stretching for something, you haven't quite gotten there yet, but you're reaching, so you're aiming for it. So prétendre means to aim, and her friend is saying that Nathalie could aim for a much better guy.
Il n'y a pas d'histoire. Il ne peut pas y avoir d'histoire.
Here, histoire or story is used the same way we refer to two people having a history in English. It implies a romantic connotation, and that's why it's translated as love story. The second part of the sentence uses an interesting construction. Il peut pas y avoir d'histoire. Since il peut pas is conjugated, the following verb needs to be in the infinitive form. So the expression il y a is turned into y avoir. It's a bit difficult to wrap your head around, I know, but it makes a little more sense if you look at the English in this case. Not possible for there to be a history.
Nathalie, c'est Yoko Ono. C'est le genre. Nathalie, c'est Yoko Ono. C'est le genre capable de te foutre en l'air le plus grand groupe de tous les temps. Voilà. C'est le genre capable de te foutre en l'air le plus grand.
Using our chunking technique again, in our first chunk we have le genre, the type. Nathalie is the type of person. Unlike in English, we don't have to say who is capable. Capable is an adjective, and you simply put it after le genre. The second chunk we have de foutre en l'air. This is an expression which means to screw something up or make a mess of something. Third chunk, le plus grand groupe de tous les temps. The biggest group or band of all time. De tous les temps quite intuitively means ever or of all time, and basically he's making an analogy between Nathalie and Yoko Ono. So I'm guessing that Nathalie is disrupting something big in his life, just like Yoko Ono is thought to have broken up the Beatles. But I think this is something we need to watch the movie to get a little more context for.
Tous les temps, voilà ce que c'est Nathalie. Tous les temps, voilà ce que c'est Nathalie. Tous les temps, voilà.
Ce que is technically an indefinite relative pronoun. It's a way of referring to something you previously mentioned when there is no exact pronoun that you can use. Here, ce que is referring to his long explanation of what Nathalie is, and since that was the object of the previous sentence, ce que is the appropriate pronoun to use.
Dehors vos cheveux. Je pourrais partir en vacances dans vos cheveux. Pas dehors vos cheveux.
Ever wonder how to flirt in French? Je pourrais, conditionnel once again, et partir en vacances dans vos cheveux.
Merci. Merci.
Yeah, I'm with Nathalie on this one. Merci, that's a weird compliment.
Je vais tomber amoureux.
C'est ridicule.
This usually doesn't happen, but the French have the expression fall in love as well. Tomber amoureux. The amoureux with the gender of who it's referring to. Amoureux ou amoureuse. And that's the trailer. Do you remember how many faux amis we got? Our first one was présentation, our second was air, and the third was prétendre. If you like deep dives like this, be sure to check out our previous video on the trailer for C'est tout pour moi. And if you want to keep building your French on the go, I've included a free PDF of even more faux amis in French.